And on the Daily Wrap tonight, 10 people now confirmed dead and more than a dozen missing after devastating floods pound Texas and Oklahoma. Is global warming to blame? 29 people shot, 9 people killed in Baltimore this past weekend has some wondering if the mayor has lost control of the city. Plus, the New York Department of Motor Vehicles has banned pro-life vanity license plates. Wait till you hear why. We've got all that, plus potluck, yay or nay. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha. Joining me is Sirius XM radio host, columnist, and the co-host of the Daily Wrap, Rick Unger. Looking well.
Feeling good.
To his right, Philly attorney at America's Pundit, Heather Hansen, joins us. And finally, he's the editor of the Wisdom Daily. Rabbi Brad Hirschfield is back again. All right, it's time for the Daily Download. And we begin with historic flooding in Texas and Oklahoma. At least 10 people are dead after several days of epic rainfall and flash floods, and that death toll could rise sharply. The Hays County officials say they're still trying to locate more than 40 people. Today, President Obama reached out to Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who declared a state of emergency in 37 counties.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the communities that have been affected by some of these devastating, record-breaking floods. I assured Governor Abbott that he could count on the help of the federal government.
And until a few months ago, Texas and neighboring states had been in the throes of a drought. The climate change crowd says going from one extreme to another is a classic sign of climate change. Are they right? We're joined now by meteorologist Joe Bastardi, chief forecaster for Weather Bell Analytics, and former chief long-range forecaster for AccuWeather. So, Joe, is this cycle of drought and floods a sign of climate change?
No, it's a sign that these people are, as I just wrote on the Patriot Post, disaster du jour. They just move like a swarm of locusts from one place to another, knowing full well that in any given place on the planet there's going to be something extreme going on, even though 99.9% of the planet, nothing extreme is going on. The weather is relatively tranquil. What incenses me about this is 3 years ago, when they were in the throes of a drought that looked like 1952 through 54, we pointed out the reasons why and said this is going to reverse. This is while these people were yelling that a new perma-drought and dust bowl was developing across Texas. Now they simply flipped the switch to this. Let me remind you folks of something, that after the 52 through 54 drought, the strongest June hurricane ever recorded, Hurricane Audrey, hit the southeast coast of Texas in June that year in 1957. So the turnarounds, these turnarounds you see have certainly happened before, and they will happen again. And it's cyclical, and it's part of what makes nature nature.
Joe, that certainly is a minority opinion, or at least a growing minority opinion, as we're seeing, at least in the media anyway.
Because people aren't bothering to look at what happened before. History began 10 minutes ago with a lot of these people. You take what the president said about Nigeria. Nigeria's rainfall has been way above normal. He's blaming drought for the rise of Boko Haram, and yet their rainfall the last 20 years has been way above normal. If he had blamed heavy rains for crop failures, that would have been more accurate there.
Joe, why do you think so many scientists seem to disagree? And you're making very pragmatic points in terms of just looking back at history, and this could just be another cyclical event. Why do you think that the conversation has gone in such a direction where climate change is blamed after every sort of storm or event like this?
Because a lot of these people don't have real world experience in forecasting, where you have to actually make a forecast to verify to be paid. So consequently, guys like me, I'm 60 years old, my partner Joe DeLeo is in his upper 60s, we have studied and researched all the patterns of the past to give us an up on what's going on now. So when someone drops the 52 through 54 drought in my lap, like we had 2010, 2012, you hook the same Pacific temperatures up there and you see the same thing go on again, and then watch the reversal. You say, okay, that's what to look for, and that's what you see going on. I wrote an article last year in the Patriot Post called Mud in the Eye of the Perma-Drought, saying that this pattern in Texas was turning around, and you're actually going to see California, even even though they're not going to get out of it, they're going to see enhanced rainfall this upcoming winter because of the cyclical nature of the overall pattern.
Joe, do you think the Earth is warming in any capacity, or do you think that's...
Yeah, it's definitely warmed over the last 100 to 200 years, but you have to ask yourself, does the increase of 1 molecule of CO2 out of every 10,000 molecules of air over a 100-year period, is that now the climate control knob over the sun, the oceans, stochastic events, the design of this system, which, by the way, we've had ice ages at 7,000 parts per million, and we've had warmer times at 250 parts per million. If you look at the geological record and the temperatures, you can find no linkage between this. And this is no longer a scientific issue, in my opinion. It is now a political football that's going back and forth. And when you've invested all your life in this, my life is invested in making weather forecasts and supplying my clients with timely data to get them ahead of the game. But when you've invested your entire life into a missive, and then all of a sudden everything starts going wrong, count all the metrics 10 years ago that were being talked about that are not happening now, then you see what's going on. People can't admit to what this is doing right now.
Well, certainly a passionate argument, Joe, and we appreciate you joining us and giving your perspective. And we hope to have you on again soon, probably after the next weather event that may or may not be blamed on climate change. So thanks so much for joining us from Pennsylvania today.
Thank you for having me.
So climate change was on the mind of President Obama last week when he gave the commencement address at the Coast Guard Academy.
Climate change constitutes a serious threat to global security, an immediate risk to our national security. And make no mistake, it will impact how our military defends our country. And so we need to act, and we need to act now.
And the White House is saying the Pentagon is assessing the vulnerability of its 7,000 bases and installations to climate change. Rick, there's a political angle to this. Few in the media and academia are talking about. So what is it?
Well, first I want to thank Joe for dressing for us.
Still his Christmas tree up as well.
I saw that too.
Thought that had some weather thing. Yeah, listen, I mean, look, we are all very concerned for the folks down in Texas, the folks in Oklahoma, I think some in Arkansas, and we should provide them with every bit of federal aid they need to get back on their feet. That said, there's a few things I just felt have to be pointed out for the big picture. One, let's keep in mind, friends, that 1 week ago, the governor of Texas was claiming that there was a possibility that the war games the United States government is currently conducting in Texas was nothing more than a subterfuge to take over Texas, which started off all of the talk about secession once again. Here we are a week later, and what's the first phone call the governor makes? To President Obama, asking him for federal assistance, which I am very happy to give him, very happy to see my tax dollars go to. They need the help. I want them to have it. But folks, let's keep this in context. Don't you feel ridiculous saying that you think that the American government is invading you 1 week only to turn around and ask us for help the next week? Another point that has to be made. When my home city of New York City suffered in the same way from a natural disaster, Superstorm Sandy, the two senators from the great state of Texas vehemently opposed the aid coming from the federal government, wanted some changes made. Even after those changes were made, they still voted against it. Gentlemen, it's really nice to run for president. It's really nice to take these ideological points of view, but you sure better stay consistent. To not want to help my city out when we need it, when I'm willing to help yours, and then to turn around and ask the federal government to help yours, that makes you one giant hypocrite.
Wouldn't you be for secession of Texas because of all the electoral votes that would go away from the Republican nominee?
I am for the secession of any state who doesn't want to be with us. I don't know why we care.
Let's
Anybody.
get Brad in.
You want to go?
Well,
go.
I think it's actually related to what you said. It has to do with public trust. And I think whether it's Joe Bastardi or the president making claims about immediate threat, which is patently ridiculous, even though climate change is clearly real, if both sides can't figure out how to dial back these maximalist claims, we're not going to get good policy from anyone.
Heather, do you think that the Coast Guard commencement was the right place to advocate?
Absolutely not. When he said something to the effect that denying climate change was a dereliction of duty, that I had huge problems with that, and I think that's what we should be talking about, not the minute points of his speech.
Seems to want to be the legacy, the climate change president in terms of, well, I started talking about it, right, but again, Coming up next, Baltimore erupts with violence this past weekend. Is the mayor to blame? Stay right there. And welcome back to the show. I'm Joe Concha along with my co-hosts Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and Brad Hirschfield. Baltimore officials are struggling to find a way to stop the surge of deadly violence after the police custody death of Freddie Gray. This Memorial Day weekend was a bloody one. Police say there were 32 shootings in which 9 people died, and May have been the deadliest month since 1999. 35 people have died in the last 30 days alone, raising the number of murders to 108 this year.
The uptick in violence is distressing and it's disheartening, and especially when you think about how far we have come. I remain resolved to work with the police department and the community to get this under control.
There have been more than 36 murders since the death of Freddie Gray. 6 police officers have been indicted in the case. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake came under intense criticism when she seemed to condone some of the violence that turned into rioting last month.
It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and the other things that were going on, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. I never said, nor would I ever say, that we are giving people space to destroy our city. So my words should not be twisted.
When you see numbers like these, it's hard not to say that this isn't a failure of leadership, both at the mayoral level and the police commissioner.
Well, look, I think it's a mistake to keep going back to that terrible thing she said a month ago. I don't think that has any bearing on what is happening right now. Actually, I think the person who had it right, and I disagreed with you, was you, Heather, when you said the other day that this is the police basically staging a slowdown of sorts. And the more I'm seeing and the more I'm hearing, the more I'm agreeing with that. And that, to me, is really upsetting. If the police don't want to do their job, they should go get another job. It's not okay for them to slow down because they're upset that some of their fellow police officers have been charged with crimes.
Heather, when you say slow down, is it because police are disheartened by the fact that they have, obviously 6 of their officers have been indicted, so they say, you know what, if the city doesn't support me, then maybe I don't feel like doing my job as aggressively? Or are they just simply doing with one hand tied behind their back because they can't be as aggressive as they used to be in terms of profiling, in terms of weeding out bad seeds?
I think it's an unconscious thing, Rick. I don't think that it's a conscious thing where they're like, we're not going to do our jobs. I think they are afraid. I mean, when you look back to the news of the people, of the community.
What's different?
And because in the past they have been, they've now had 6 of their brothers be arrested for doing the, right. But that is something that is going to be, and it's natural. You know, when you look back when those 2 police officers in New York City were killed in December, the arrests dropped down 66% for the following month. This is a natural progression after this type of thing happens, where police officers are afraid and criminals are empowered. And the combination of those 2 things leads to statistics like what we're seeing.
I have to disagree with that. Number one, the arrest dropped down in New York not because those 2 poor officers were killed, but they were so angry at the mayor. That's number one. Number 2, it's unacceptable to use that as an excuse. It really is. And you said it. You said they're upset that the 5 or 6 police officers were arrested. Well, guess what? The police are not above the law, and if they're charged and indicted with the crime, they get arrested and they get tried. And that does not justify other police officers not doing their job. It's very simple. Do your job according to the rules, and you don't have to worry.
But the pattern that it seems to be here with Bill de Blasio in New York and now Rawlings Blake down in Baltimore is that the appearance was that it was the mayors taking the side of the protesters, rioters, whatever we want to call them, against the police, and then the police rebelling back against the mayor. So we saw it in New York, we saw it in Baltimore. Am I warm here on this?
I think you're more than warm. I don't think we can judge intent on the part of the police as easily as you
if
are.
You're saying he's warm, then you are judging.
No, because where he's warm on it, it's not just a sense of. We know in Baltimore, the mayor and the prosecutor went into the streets and said, we hear your call, no justice, no peace. Why is the mayor and why is the prosecutor not in the street tonight saying no peace, no justice? For no justice, no peace to be an authentic claim, and there are times when it is, The counterclaim of no peace, no justice is also an obligation.
I'm totally okay with that
and
argument.
they're not out in the streets
I am
doing
totally
that.
okay,
and they
but
have
that's
to be
not,
out in the streets doing
that's
that.
That's a good argument. It's a great argument. I agree with you 150%, and it has nothing to do with crime going up.
It has everything to do with it.
No,
Crime
it doesn't.
is socially constructed. It happens in a context.
Guys, let's get
and that's
real.
what you just
no.
said.
Let me
They've got
say
to get out there
Let me
and do
say
their job.
Say something.
Let's get real. If the mayor went out in the middle of the city this very moment and said what you just said exactly, you think crime is going to suddenly reduce?
I absolutely think it'll make a difference for one reason,
You can't
because then
take
people
any
would
of these
feel
things.
that it's as much an act of social justice to stand with the cops and against crime
This
as
isn't
they
about
do to
social
riot.
justice. It's people killing people.
Let's move on.
They're not
Meanwhile,
interested
in Melbourne, Florida, police say an angry crowd attacked a police officer as he tried to make an arrest this weekend. Police say 22-year-old Phoenix Lowe became combative as the officer tried to make the arrest. Police say the crowd struck the officer, yelled at him, and tried to pull him away from the suspect. Said suspect briefly got away before being arrested. Police say this was actually the second time in as many weeks that a crowd had interfered with an arrest. Is this a possible sign of disrespect?
Absolutely, and this is exactly what Brad's talking about. There's a change in culture. So, Rick, you can't take any one of these things in a vacuum. You can't say these police are just choosing not to do their jobs. There's fear there. There's frustration.
Then leave your job and give it to somebody who's willing to do it.
Who? Who's going to be willing to
Well,
do the
let's
job
fi-
where you're
I'll
getting
bet you there's a
shot,
lot
you're
of
getting
people.
you're getting
Bet you there's
attacked by the media, you're
No,
getting attacked
tragically,
by
the people most willing to do it at that moment and exercise force will do fierce force that's illegal. So the irony is we're trying to get to a place where you're unafraid and willing to be forceful while you're being respectful of the citizenry.
What about the
and that's why
citizens
Joe
who
comes
are
back.
afraid?
Let them march. Where is the marching in the streets that we want to be safe? And we will not accept anything less than that.
How does that
That's the
justify
counterclaim.
police officers backing off their jobs?
Because
And
no one's
by the
proved
way,
they're backing off their jobs.
Well, no, actually, Heather said it, and I agree.
No, I say that
agreeing
the
with doesn't
cops
make it
are
so.
empowered, and the police are. The fact that the police are not arresting the same comes from a number of things. It's not just one thing, and it's not
And
a
you're
conscious
okay with that?
decision.
You're
no,
okay
of
with
course
that?
not. But it's
Well,
not
then they're
due
not
to
doing their
one
job.
particular thing.
You're not
Guys, we're
okay
going to talk
with
about
that.
this
They're
more
not
again,
doing
I
their job.
swear to you. Do you trust the government? This is the Daily Wrap. As we talk next. Don't go anywhere.
Frankly, there's never been a time in my lifetime when people are more distrustful of government.
Wrap. I'm Joe Concha along with Unger, Hansen, Hirschfield. That was former Arkansas governor and 2016 Republican candidate Mike Huckabee on Fox News Sunday. The former Southern Baptist preacher is not putting much faith in the government when it comes to a controversial portion of the NSA surveillance program. And Americans don't trust the government either. Only 6% say they're very confident in the government's ability to keep our records private and secure. More than half say they're not too confident or not confident at all. Huckabee says Congress should eliminate the portion of the Patriot Act that allows the government to collect private phone records.
You go to a judge, you get a warrant, and then you listen in on his calls, because now you've got the other branch of government that's constitutionally required to be a part of that process. You don't just give the executive branch unlimited resources, unlimited power.
It's a race against the clock to figure out what to do with the Patriot Act, which expires at the end of the month. But Congress is in recess right now and won't be back to vote on the bill. What's going to happen here, Unger?
Well, look, I actually agree with Huckabee on the issue.
First time all year.
However, I do have to point out the irony of Huckabee not realizing that he is one of the reasons we don't trust the government. Because people like him make outrageous statements, one day saying the Supreme Court's a wonderful thing when he agrees with them, and then turns around the next day and says the Supreme Court cannot overrule the other two branches of government, which is what he said yesterday. Right. He's wrong. Governor Huckabee, if you want to be the President of the United States, don't be a moron. Understand what the Supreme Court can do under the Constitution. He is a big part of the reason that we don't trust government. If he wants that to change, you got to start by changing
I was going to
himself.
get the Huckabee Unger bumper stickers that I saw.
No need. I saved you the money.
Done.
I saved you the
It's
money.
over. Hanson.
What he was talking about with getting a warrant and all of that, that's the USA Freedom Act that is trying to pass its way through Congress to maybe perhaps become law. I don't think the reason that people don't trust the government has anything to do with the NSA and this type of thing. I think people are okay with that. I think that the reason they don't trust government is because of the money, the lobbying,
And the boneheads.
Citizens United, things like that, the things that actually impact people's
Dysfunction,
lives.
maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I
Boneheads.
think that
That's
that is
right.
the problem. I don't think that this issue with collection of data makes a whole lot of difference to a lot of people. And before the show tonight, we found out that the IRS has been hacked and about 100,000 people's information has been stolen. But the interesting thing there is how many times it's been tried and not successful. So we do have some good things that happen within the government, and there is some good protection there.
On the IRS hacking, can I just preempt Rick for a second? Where I know he is going to say, if the IRS kept their server in Chappaqua
It would have all been
at
fine.
Hillary's house,
been okay.
then it would have been okay.
Well,
We'd have
will
to
they
fight for
learn?
the records and eventually recover 55,000 of the 100,000 of them.
Right.
When will they? Well, that's
Pay
a
someone to
technicality.
print
Come on.
Clearly. Look, I think Rick is right about this. I think that in Heather as well. There is no evidence that people's suspicion about the government and its functionality has anything to do with metadata gathering by the NSA or other security agencies. It has everything to do with stoking fear. And in that regard, Governor Huckabee, as well-intentioned as he may be, is stoking that fear.
not
The truth of the matter is, well, that's, again, you judge intent, I try not to. I try and just judge those results. And the results of stoking fears right now is that faith in government, whether it's a conservative government or a progressive government, is plummeting. And when there's no confidence in public institutions, we actually can't fight the fights we have to fight. It's simply not appropriate to unrealistically stoke people's fears. You can disagree with certain implementation, but he is a part of the problem, whether he knows it or not. And he needs to dial that back and get things better aligned.
I swore that we would go no Hillary tonight. It wasn't in the rundown anywhere.
Not possible.
You know, we had a
be
nice
done.
little streak going of 37 straight shows. But I can't help but go back to you saying that no one trusts anybody in government. So does that help or hurt her, since her untrustworthy numbers are so high that people just expect everybody to lie to them anyway in government?
So I think what it does for her is the small core of real Hillaryites. They're past it. They don't care. They're in love. It's a religion, and they follow her religiously. I think for everyone else, it's she is actually a part of the problem, even if they respect her or agree with her on certain issues, because that above-the-law aspect is what I think people across the board in this country are getting really tired of.
But the problem is, I think that most of your typical Americans who don't follow this stuff on a day-to-day just think everyone's like that. So she's no different than the rest, and they all have their hidden emails that we're just not hearing about. And so then therefore, she's the one that I like best, and I want a woman to win.
Little overstatement on the religion thing. However, other than that, you guys
I
have
didn't
it
say
right.
you were one of the true
No, I know,
believers.
but it's
You're one of the smart believers.
But you guys both have, we all have it right. I mean, you know, people don't trust government because government is filled with boneheads. It's that simple. When we start getting respectable people running for government office, if that should ever happen, and they start behaving like grown-ups instead of children, then we'll begin to trust them. It's not that difficult.
Do you think that Bill O'Reilly will challenge you to a bonehead pinhead kind of
I
argument?
hope so.
You know,
Nothing I'd
because
like better.
He's already got the head thing going,
Yeah.
but now you're taking bone and
Well, I've
expanding
had
it.
bonehead for. Do you know I once trademarked the word bonehead?
Did you really?
It's a long story, but yes.
That's where the money came
trademark.
from.
That's
It all makes sense now. Anyway, coming up next, the New York DMV is banning pro-life license plates. Find out why in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. And yet another case of political correctness gone awry. Choose Life license plates are now banned in the state of New York because the plates' pro-life views are, quote, patently offensive. The plate in question comes from the, quote, Children's First Foundation and features a crayon-like drawing of two children's faces in front of a yellow sun as a way to promote adoption as an alternative to abortion. The DMV rejected the license plates in order to prevent possible road rage incidents, despite the judge, Rosemary Pooler, previously ruling that license plates fall under First Amendment speech rights, while I screw up speech in general. So,
They are under speech rights.
yeah, they are.
They
It's
are.
true. Anyway, Hanson, what do you make of all this?
Well, from the very start, I think that states should not be selling these license plates, and then we would never have this problem. As soon as they opened it up to monetizing these license plates, once you do that, you now have to let people put what they want to put on them. And I think that this decision, where they are saying that the risk of danger, I mean, this brings brings us back to that Pamela Geller argument as to whether or not certain speech should be somehow curtailed because it might be dangerous. I think that that is dangerous. I think it's dangerous to the First Amendment. So I think that this case, by saying that it might create road rage, so we're not going to allow that to happen, who is this judge, and this is what the dissent said, who is this judge to say that this will create road rage and something will not? Ultimately, this will be decided very soon by the U.S. Supreme Court, which had a similar case before, and the decision will come out in June.
Brad, I live in New Jersey and I drive in New York often. Trust me, there's a lot of road rage out there already.
Yeah.
A license plate isn't going to add to all the road rage that's in Manhattan and around New York State.
Look, let's be
but
clear.
To your point,
What's patently offensive here is the judge labeling this patently offensive. It's insane. And has nothing to do with where people stand on the issue of pro-choice or anti-choice or pro-life. Call any language you want.
Did the judge do that here?
Yes, because by labeling it patently offensive, that's the clause that she invoked in order to say this can't happen. That's crazy. That is actually, because look, there are limits on free speech. We should be clear about that. And I think it's very possible to defend someone's right to assert free speech, even within the limits, and still say they're being idiots and should be challenged publicly. This doesn't even ride to that. In fact, I could make an argument on Choose Life that the pro-choice movement should have run out and bought thousands of these plates and made the argument that actually the position to be pro-choice is a form of being pro-life, but it's pro the life of the mother. That may not be my position, but to say this is patently offensive, it's two little kids smiling. Something is fundamentally wrong in the culture when two cartoons of kids with the words choose life, right? This is not some aborted fetus. This is not some grotesque image. I would understand that. This is an angry person imposing their politics on people who made an interesting license plate. If you're going to be in the business, this is surely inside of what's legitimate.
Rick, you were a judge once.
Yeah,
How would you have ruled?
Just for some clarity, my understanding is it wasn't a judge that said that they didn't have to issue this license plate. It was a DMV person who refused to.
And
right?
then it went to court.
But the judge, I thought, said that they should issue it,
And
right?
then the appeals
And then it
court
was
said
overturned.
no.
That they shouldn't. They said that it was.
They-
Right now, it's
Okay.
a no
I
under
just
the
wanted to
patently
be clear.
offensive deal.
And,
Got
but
it.
they're waiting for the Supreme
Well,
Court.
I disagree with that verdict also. Look, I don't compare it to the Pamela Geller situation for a lot of reasons that we won't go into now. But I do think that, look, the First Amendment is all about government impeding our right to say what we want. And this is a direct case where government is impeding somebody's right. And if the rationale for regulating it is that it may cause road violence, well, I'll tell you what, I might get just as angry if I see NRA 1
Right,
with a gun drawn on it, or long live the South will rise.
Well,
You could
and
go
that's-
on and on
it's
and on with
Endless
specialty
what
plates.
might annoy
Right.
you to the point
So,
of violence.
yeah,
That's not
I-
the law's job.
I
If you
agree
have a
with
violence
you guys.
problem,
It's-
you got to correct your violence
Yeah.
problem.
Either
not
get rid of
restrict people's
specialty
rights.
plates altogether,
Well, and that's,
or
I
live
think
with
that's
what people
fine,
want
you
to
know.
say.
But that's what the dissent, it was 2-1, this decision of this
Right.
appellate court. And that's what the dissent said. They said, there may be a public interest, and there's a whole argument of whether or not this is a public forum. Won't get into the weeds. But there may be a public interest, but we're not, who's to say? Who's to say what's offensive?
Right.
The case that's in front of the Supreme Court right now has to do with the Confederate flag and license plates with the Confederate flag on it. And the
that's
decision as
offensive to some people.
many people,
Right.
that's offensive. And could create violence.
You just made my transition perfect because I was going to bring this up anyway. The number one show in the country, it was on CBS in 1980,
Yes.
was the Dukes of Hazzard. It flip-flopped between Dallas and Dukes of Hazzard. They're both on Friday night, which is
Right.
now a graveyard for most
Graveyard,
shows.
that's right.
You know what that car had on the
Right.
roof? It had
Stars
the
and bars.
Confederate
That's
flag.
right. Yeah.
And Bowen looked like pretty reasonable guys. They didn't look like somebody who was walking around
That
with like,
show offended so many people. It was number one for how many years?
well, for at least 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But I think, Joe, that's the key. When you saw the stars and bars in the context of real people who you kind of identified with and liked, it wasn't a problem. When you're sitting on a bench making laws in general, you can make anything really a problem. And that's the issue. There's no context, and she made the wrong decision. In human context, no
Besides,
problem.
they don't have Daisy Duke on all of these cars, and that makes a big difference.
No, they do not.
We'll order them up for you.
Can you name the bar from the Dukes of Hazzard?
No, I can name Catherine Bach, who played Daisy
Catherine
Duke,
Bach did?
but I can't name the bar.
Okay, it was the Boar's Nest.
Oh,
So if I ever open a bar with the proper funding, I was thinking of Boar's Nest. Anyway, Potluck is next. This is the Daily Wrap. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, welcome back to the show. It's Potluck time. This is the part of the program where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Hirschfield You're up first.
Okay, Ray McDonald, defensive end, Chicago Bears, he got released. He got released because apparently we don't care about law when it comes to sports anymore. We care about offering up guys who've done something wrong, regardless of letting the law unfold and do its job. This is crazy. I want to be clear. He has a problem with hitting women. He did it again. And the Bears are inside the law on this because apparently his contract included that kind of clause.
Give the background of what happened and why he was released.
Okay, he hit someone in California. He hit a woman. He's accused of it, and that's why he's been arrested. He has not been, he's been charged, he hasn't been tried, he hasn't been convicted. But the Chicago Bears did release him, and releasing him seems to be legal, though people don't understand this. In many cases, it's not. You can't fire people because they've been accused of doing something, unless he has a contract that said if you get in trouble with the law around domestic abuse, whether it's proven or not, we're cutting you loose. So they cut him loose. The worst of this, though, is not that silliness. We now have sports writers that believe the Chicago Bears should be punished for ever hiring him. They would like to see the team fined, lose draft choices, fire the general manager, keep the owners out of their owner's box for at least half the season. Why? Because apparently the idea that you can go before the law, either take your punishment or get beyond it, doesn't matter. We should just not hire these people no matter what. I want to be clear. Domestic violence is a very serious issue. It's underreported in this country, and it's often underpunished. But that has nothing to do with turning competitive sports into a venue for playing out policy that we don't like or a reality that we don't approve of. That's just deeply, deeply wrong.
We need to have some disclosure here. You're a Bears fan. I'm a Bears fan.
The Bears.
I need to know if the Bears specifically said when they cut him that it was because of this incident, or did they just say, well, you know, we don't have enough money under the cap, or we just, in other words, did they specifically say we're cutting him because of this?
They
or
did.
They just, okay.
They did. They said, we believe in second chances. But when we signed Ray, we were very clear what our expectations were if he was to remain a Chicago Bear. He was not able to meet the standard, and the decision was made to release him.
Can I say something about this, though? I mean, I actually agree with the second part of what you raised, but the first part I'm having some trouble with. You would be very hard-pressed to find any contract with any individual in any area that constitutes entertainment, public performance. And that's what football players are.
Morality
where
clause.
there is not a morality clause. So there's nothing shocking that he would be fired for this. The second part, let me just say, I agree with you completely, because we can't be in the business of telling people who employ people that they're responsible for their behavior. I read that article by that writer. It was stupid.
Right.
It was just stupid.
I agree with all of you, except for the fact that he had been let go of another team, and that because he had been accused of hitting a woman, in the culture that they're in, I can understand how some fans could be frustrated with that, but I'm frustrated with the system and its failure to protect these women, and I think that that's where the problem lies.
That's the larger issue. This feels like a proxy war to take it out on him, what the system can't do, let alone the fans who are support of violent sport.
They're exercising an important right in a contract. I've had contracts with performers, and I've always had that morals clause in there, because you can really do a lot of damage to your brand or your business if you keep people like that around when they violate it. And it's never or rarely is it predicated on a conviction, because it's too late.
But you wouldn't do it to the team.
So
you wouldn't punish the team.
No.
Then we agree.
We'll need to move on. My only question for you is how did you get in here if there's a morality clause?
And you know, now that you've given it away, this will be the last time you see me, probably.
No. Anyway, you're up, Unger.
I'm up. Okay, so we know it's election season because suddenly we're hearing a great deal about the flat tax once again. So I thought we ought to take a minute or two and talk about the flat tax. What could be good about it? What could be bad about it? And what lurking problem exists that we can't solve it? The good news, it certainly does sound more fair than what we have now. Everybody pays their own proportional share. Everybody's taxed at the same rate. Sounds pretty good, right? Maybe not as good as you think. Now, understand that I have been trained in the flat tax by the godfather of the flat tax, my friend Stephen Forbes, and he makes a very compelling argument. But here's where you start to get into some problems. First of all, the math tends to indicate that the average American middle-class person would end up paying about $450 a year more than what they pay now. it may not strike you as a terrible amount to have a fair system where we don't have 75,000 pages in the IRS tax code. Millionaires, on the other hand, would save up to $500,000 under a flat tax, so that's problematic. You also have problems at the lower end of the spectrum. And again, to be fair, Steve Forbes does acknowledge that. Here's the real problem. We get rid of the 75,000 pages. Awesome. Anybody going to tell me how we can guarantee that the special interests don't come along and begin altering the flat tax and we end up with 75,000 more? Nobody has yet told me how to avoid that.
Compelling argument. Do you still talk to Mr. Forbes?
All the time.
Really? Okay. Is he running for president? Because everybody
No,
else is.
he's not running for president.
All right. It's a fair question. Anyway, that's all the time we have for our potluck tonight. But when we come back, it's time for Yay or Nay. This is the Daily Wrap. And it's time for Yay or Nay. First up, the IRS revealing today that thieves used an IRS-provided online service called Get Transcript. Excuse me, one moment. There we go.
Little microphone.
Get Transcript, a little technical issue, thank you everybody, to access the information of more than 100,000 taxpayers. In a statement from the IRS, the agency says they believe the hacks took place between February and mid-May and that their main system that handles tax filings was not affected by the breach. The service has been temporarily shut down. Can the IRS be trusted? And again, if the IRS server were kept on the Clinton private residence, would it ever happen, which we asked before? Let's just get back to the main question, which is, can the IRS be trusted, Brett Hirschfield?
By and large, yes, but hacks are going to be a real part of life moving forward. That's the way it is.
I don't think they can be trusted for reasons other than the hacks. We have other problems with the IRS.
That's true.
That's a separate issue.
Well, yeah, I'm going to go with Heather on this. I'm very disturbed about how they're taking people's money without hearings. I don't trust anybody who does that.
Very good. Some more government mistrust at the table. For teen clothing stores like Abercrombie & Finch, American Apparel, and Hollister, 3 places that Rick was shopping at this weekend. Selling inappropriate tongue-in-cheek graphic T-shirts is nothing new, but retailer Pacific Sunwear is getting a lot of heat for their T-shirt featuring an upside-down American flag. The $24 T-shirt, part of a rapper's A$AP Rocky's, yeah, I don't have him on my 8-track system, unfortunately, clothing line, has upset more than a few people who say the shirt is disrespectful and has since taken to social media asking shoppers to boycott the company. PacSun has apologized and removed the shirt from their website and stores. Did PacSun know what they were doing when they decided to sell this T-shirt in their stores? Yay or nay, Heather Hansen?
I don't know whether they knew or not, and I think that they were stupid if they didn't know, but the flag protects those that hold it in contempt, and the flag protects those that are stupid. Our Supreme Court says that you can burn the flag, and that's okay under the First Amendment, so I think that if people were going to buy it, they could, but no one will, and that's great.
I think your personalized personalized plate's going to be First Amendment.
I've never, you know what, it's growing on me more and more.
By the way, do you know that means something, the upside-down flag? It has an actual
distress.
meaning.
Yeah, it's a distress signal.
So maybe that was the point of the T-shirt.
I think it was. That's why the anarchy symbol's on the sleeve. The irony to me is,
if that's the case, I'm not that offended by it.
Well, the interesting thing is the upside-down flag has been used by both the far left and the far right. Yeah. So the irony is, who's supposed to be offended by this?
But I have to ask, House of Cards, I don't watch. Was that in upside-down flag?
Yes, upside-down flag on the logo. Definitely.
It is.
Yep. Not in black and white, though. This was a black and white flag, which maybe is supposed to indicate some sort of racial distress. The one on the right is.
Oh, the one on the right.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, let's move on. Many actors lucky enough to star in the long-running television series often complain that the public can never separate them from the characters they played. JJ from Good Times is the first thing that comes to mind. I met him on a cruise ship once, and I said to him, "Dynamite," and he got so angry. Oh my God.
Man.
But anyway, in this case, it's the actor who can't seem to shake off his own character. You know, actor Hugh Laurie, he played Gregory House for 8 years on the hit show House, telling British talk show host Graham Norton that while he cannot remember any lines from the show, whenever he hears the word action, he starts limping like one of Pavlov's dogs. Depending on the role, this could be a serious problem for some actors. Should there be some sort of rehab center for actors who need to separate themselves from their characters? Yay or nay?
Rehab? No. Does it happen? Sure. Method acting at its finest. He'll deal with it.
Heather.
Yeah, he just needs a little bit of therapy, not rehab.
Don't worry about Hugh Laurie. He's doing a great job on Veep. Nothing like the House character. He pulls it off. And anybody who knew Hugh Laurie before House and knew what a brilliant British comic he is and the parts that he played, this is a non-issue.
Okay. Does he limp on Veep at all?
No.
Okay,
He
very
does
good.
not.
And finally, it sounds like something out of the movie Terminator, but Canadian Dr. Garth Webb says vision up to 3 times better than 20/20 is possible. I need it right now. Through a bionic lens he has created that can also prevent cataracts. The lens are implemented into an 8-minute surgery similar to cataract surgery, and in under 10 seconds, the patient's vision is corrected. Bionic vision, yay or nay, quickly?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yay, what's not to like?
Absolutely, and it only takes 10 seconds. I mean, you can't beat that, right? Anyway, panel, tremendous job tonight. Thank you so much, and thank you, audience, as well, for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow night. I'm Joe Concha. Newsmax Prime with J.D. Hayesworth is next.